The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Commander Sarah Mitchell walked purposefully toward the main briefing hall. Her crisp uniform bore the insignia of her rank, earned through 15 years of dedicated service, countless deployments, and a reputation that preceded her in intelligence circles. But today, like many days before, she knew that her appearance might not immediately command the respect her position deserved. At 38, Sarah had learned to navigate a world where assumptions were often made before introductions were complete. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches with an unassuming presence, she had grown accustomed to proving herself repeatedly. Her expertise in counterterrorism operations and strategic intelligence had taken her from the deserts of Afghanistan to the corridors of the Pentagon. But the challenge of being recognized for her achievements rather than judged by preconceptions remained constant. The briefing hall buzzed with activity as various military personnel prepared for the Joint Operations meeting. Representatives from different branches had gathered to discuss a critical mission that would require unprecedented cooperation. Sarah noticed the mix of uniforms: Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, each group naturally clustering with their own kind. The energy in the room was electric with anticipation and the weight of important decisions to come. As she approached her designated seat near the front of the room, Sarah became aware of a conversation taking place behind her. The voices carried the confidence of youth and the bravado that often accompanied elite units. She recognized the tone immediately. It was the sound of SEALs discussing their latest training exercise, their voices filled with the pride that came from being part of one of the military's most respected special operations forces. "Did you see who they assigned to brief us on intelligence protocols?" one voice said with barely concealed amusement. "Looks like they sent someone's secretary instead of an actual officer." Sarah's steps slowed imperceptibly, but she continued walking. She had heard variations of this conversation more times than she cared to count. The speaker continued, his voice carrying across the room with the carelessness of someone who believed his words would go unchallenged. "I mean, seriously, what's next? Are they going to have the coffee lady explain tactical operations?" The comment drew snickers from his companions. This is exactly what's wrong with the military these days. They're more concerned with checking boxes than putting qualified people in charge. The SEAL's voice grew more animated as he warmed to his theme. "Look at her rank insignia, probably got promoted through some diversity program rather than earning it in the field. I bet she's never even seen real combat, let alone led a mission that actually mattered." Sarah reached her seat and placed her briefing materials on the table. The folder contained classified documents that detailed operations she had personally planned and executed, missions that had saved countless lives and disrupted terrorist networks across 3 continents. But the men behind her saw none of that. They saw only what their preconceptions allowed them to see. "I heard she's supposed to be some kind of intelligence expert," another voice chimed in. "Probably spent her whole career behind a desk, analyzing reports that real soldiers wrote after doing the actual dangerous work." The conversation continued, each comment building on the last, creating a narrative that bore no resemblance to Sarah's actual experience. They spoke about her as if she weren't in the room, as if her presence was so insignificant that discretion wasn't necessary. The irony wasn't lost on her. These men, trained in observation and tactical awareness, had failed to observe the most important detail of all. Sarah opened her folder and reviewed her notes one final time. The mission they were about to discuss was one she knew intimately, having spent months developing the intelligence framework that would guide their operations. Her analysis had identified critical vulnerabilities in enemy positions, potential civilian casualties that could be avoided with proper planning, and extraction routes that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The SEAL's commentary reached a crescendo of dismissiveness. "This is what happens when politics gets involved in military operations. They put someone with the right demographics in charge instead of someone with the right qualifications. When lives are on the line, that kind of thinking gets people killed." His words carried across the room, causing heads to turn and conversations to pause. Sarah felt the weight of multiple gazes settling on her, some curious, others sympathetic, many simply uncomfortable with the public nature of the criticism being leveled. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments often only escalated the situation, drawing more attention to attitudes that were better addressed through demonstration rather than argument. The SEAL seemed to interpret the attention his words had garnered as validation rather than concern. He leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of someone who believed he had made an important point. Mark my words, this briefing is going to be a complete waste of time. We'll probably learn more from the training manual than from whatever presentation she's planning to give. Sarah closed her folder and stood up, her movements deliberate and controlled. She had faced enemy fire in hostile territory, had made split-second decisions that affected the lives of soldiers and civilians alike, and had earned her rank through dedication and sacrifice that these men couldn't imagine. But in this moment, none of that seemed to matter to the voices behind her. The room continued to fill as more personnel arrived for the briefing. Sarah noted the entrance of several high-ranking officers, their presence indicated by the subtle changes in posture and conversation volume that always accompanied senior leadership. She recognized faces from previous operations, colleagues who knew her capabilities intimately and had witnessed her performance under pressure. As the start time approached, Sarah walked to the front of the room and began setting up her presentation equipment. The SEAL's comments continued in the background, his voice now joined by others who felt emboldened by his example. They discussed her qualifications, her appearance, and her right to be in the room with the casual cruelty that sometimes emerged when people felt safely anonymous in a crowd. Sarah connected her laptop to the projector and tested the presentation slides. Each image and bullet point represented hours of analysis, coordination with field operatives, and strategic planning that had taken her team months to complete. The intelligence they had gathered would be crucial to the success of the upcoming operation, potentially saving dozens of lives and achieving objectives that had eluded previous attempts. The murmur of conversation in the room began to change as more senior officers took their seats. Sarah noticed the shift in energy that always preceded important briefings, the gradual transition from casual discussion to focused attention. But the SEAL's voice remained constant, his commentary continuing as if the increased presence of senior leadership was irrelevant to his assessment. "I still can't believe they put her in charge of this briefing," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now quieter room. "When you're planning operations that could determine the outcome of major missions, you want someone with real experience, not someone who got their position through connections or political correctness." Sarah finished her setup and moved to her position at the front of the room. She had delivered hundreds of briefings over the course of her career, addressing everyone from squad leaders to cabinet-level officials. Each presentation required her to distill complex information into actionable intelligence, to anticipate questions, and provide answers that could influence life-and-death decisions. The clock on the wall showed that the briefing would begin in just a few minutes. Sarah took a moment to survey the room, noting the mix of faces, some familiar, others new, all representing the best and of America's military forces. These were the people who would carry out the mission she was about to describe, who would put their lives at risk based on the intelligence she and her team had gathered. Behind her, the SEAL's voice continued its critique, apparently oblivious to the changing dynamics in the room. "This is exactly the kind of situation that makes you wonder about the future of our military. When appearance and politics matter more than competence and experience, we're all in trouble." Sarah straightened her uniform and prepared to begin what would become one of the most memorable briefings of her career. She had no way of knowing that in just a few minutes, the entire dynamic of the room would shift dramatically, and that the man who had spent the past 20 minutes questioning her qualifications would find himself face-to-face with a reality he had never imagined possible. The double doors at the back of the briefing hall opened with a subtle whoosh that immediately commanded attention. Sarah glanced toward the entrance and felt her pulse quicken slightly, not from nervousness, but from the recognition of what was about to unfold. 4 figures entered the room in succession, their presence immediately shifting the entire atmosphere of the gathering. General Hawkins entered first, her 4-star insignia catching the overhead lights as she surveyed the room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to command. Behind her followed General, whose reputation in special operations was legendary throughout the military community. General David brought up the 3rd position, his expertise in international intelligence making him one of the most respected strategic minds in the armed forces. Finally, General Stone entered, her distinguished career in joint operations having earned her recognition across all service branches. The transformation in the room was instantaneous and profound. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence, chairs scraped against the floor as personnel rose to attention, and the casual atmosphere that had pervaded the gathering evaporated completely. The presence of 4 generals in a single briefing room was unprecedented, the kind of occurrence that happened perhaps once in a military career, if ever. The SEAL who had been conducting his running commentary found himself frozen mid-gesture, his hand halfway to his coffee cup as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. His companions, equally stunned by the unexpected arrival of such high-ranking leadership, struggled to process what they were witnessing. This was no ordinary briefing. This was something far more significant than any of them had anticipated. General Hawkins's voice cut through the silence with the authority that comes from decades of leadership. "As you were, everyone, please remain seated." Her words carried across the room, but the tension in the air remained palpable. Officers and enlisted personnel alike found themselves sitting, their attention focused entirely on the unprecedented gathering of senior leadership. The SEAL's face had drained of color as he began to realize the implications of what was happening. If 4 generals had taken time from their demanding schedules to attend this briefing, it meant that whatever was about to be discussed was of the highest importance. More troubling for him was the growing realization that the woman he had been dismissing for the past 20 minutes was clearly connected to something far beyond his understanding. General stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the assembled personnel before settling on Sarah. "Ladies we are here today because the operation you're about to learn about represents one of the most critical missions our joint forces have undertaken in the past decade. The intelligence briefing you're about to receive will determine the success or failure of an operation that could reshape the strategic landscape in 3 different theaters of conflict." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Personnel who had entered expecting a routine briefing found themselves part of something that would likely define their careers. The SEAL felt his stomach beginning to churn as pieces of a very unwelcome puzzle began falling into place. General moved to stand beside his colleagues, his expression serious as he addressed the room. "The intelligence framework for this operation was developed over the course of 8 months by a team led by one of our most accomplished officers. The analysis you're about to hear represents the synthesis of human intelligence, satellite reconnaissance, electronic surveillance, and field operative reports from assets positioned in some of the most dangerous locations on Earth." Sarah remained standing at the front of the room, her composure unchanged despite the extraordinary circumstances unfolding around her. She had known this moment would come, had been briefed on the protocol for when the generals arrived, but seeing the shock and realization dawning on the faces before her still carried a certain satisfaction. General Stone stepped forward to complete the introduction that would forever change how everyone in the room viewed the woman they had been observing. "The officer responsible for this comprehensive intelligence operation has served with distinction in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. She has personally led 17 high-risk missions, coordinated intelligence operations that have disrupted 12 major terrorist networks, and developed tactical frameworks that are now standard protocol across all special operations forces." The SEAL's face had progressed from pale to ashen as the full scope of his mistake became clear. Around him, his fellow team members were beginning to understand that they had been listening to him criticize someone whose qualifications far exceeded anything they had imagined possible. The casual dismissal of the past 20 minutes now seemed not just inappropriate, but professionally catastrophic. General Hawkins stepped forward to deliver the words that would complete the SEAL's mortification. "Commander Sarah Mitchell has been selected to lead the intelligence component of this operation, because there is simply no one more qualified for this particular mission. Her expertise in counterterrorism, her field experience, and her strategic insight make her uniquely suited to guide what may be the most important joint operation of our generation." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the room now understood that they were in the presence of someone whose reputation and capabilities were recognized at the highest levels of military leadership. The woman who had been dismissed as unqualified was, in fact, more qualified than anyone else in the room for the task at hand. Sarah cleared her throat gently, her voice carrying easily across the now silent hall. "Thank you, generals, for that introduction. I know many of you are wondering why this briefing carries such importance and why we have such distinguished leadership present today. The answer is simple. The mission we're about to discuss will require the absolute best from all of us, and failure is not an option." The SEAL found himself unable to look away from the woman he had spent 20 minutes belittling. Every assumption he had made, every criticism he had voiced, every dismissive comment he had shared was now revealed as profoundly ignorant. Worse, he realized that his commentary had been delivered in front of four generals who clearly held Commander Mitchell in the highest regard. As Sarah began her presentation, the room's attention focused entirely on her words. The first slide revealed satellite imagery of a compound that had been under surveillance for months. The level of detail was extraordinary, building layouts, personnel movements, security protocols, and dozens of other data points that painted a comprehensive picture of their target. The intelligence we've gathered indicates that this facility serves as the coordination hub for terrorist operations across 3 continents, Sarah explained, her voice professional and confident. Our analysis has identified 17 key individuals who use this location for planning and resource allocation. More importantly, we've discovered that they're planning a coordinated attack that would make September 11th look like a minor incident. The gravity of her words hit the room like a physical force. This wasn't just another mission. This was a race against time to prevent a catastrophe that could reshape global security. The SEAL felt his earlier comments echoing in his mind, each word now seeming more foolish and inappropriate than the last. Sarah continued her briefing with the precision and expertise that had earned her recognition from the highest levels of command. She detailed escape routes, civilian considerations, potential complications, and contingency plans with the thoroughness that comes from genuine expertise and careful preparation. Every question from the audience was answered with depth and clarity that demonstrated intimate knowledge of every aspect of the operation. General leaned forward in his seat, his attention focused entirely on Sarah's presentation. Commander, your team's identification of the secondary extraction routes could be the difference between mission success and loss of personnel. How confident are you in the accuracy of this intelligence? Sarah's response was immediate and assured. Sir, we've had assets in position for 3 months and weave these routes through multiple sources. I would stake my career on the reliability of this information. The SEAL watched this exchange with growing horror at his own earlier presumption. Here was a woman discussing matters of national security with 4-star generals, demonstrating expertise that he couldn't begin to comprehend, and doing so with the confidence that comes from genuine accomplishment and recognition. General addressed the room directly, his words carrying unmistakable emphasis. I want everyone here to understand that Commander Mitchell's intelligence work has already saved an estimated 300 American lives through operations she's planned and executed over the past 2 years. Her strategic insight and field experience make her one of our most valuable assets. The endorsement from such a senior leader left no doubt about Sarah's standing within the military hierarchy. The SEAL felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him, his earlier confidence replaced by the devastating realization that he had publicly criticized someone whose achievements far surpassed his own. As the briefing continued, Sarah outlined the specific roles each unit would play in the upcoming operation. Her knowledge of special operations capabilities, logistical requirements, and tactical considerations was comprehensive and detailed. She spoke with the authority of someone who had been there, who had faced the challenges they would encounter, and who understood the stakes involved. General Stone stood up as Sarah concluded her presentation, preparing to deliver words that would complete the SEAL's humiliation and forever change how he viewed assumptions and prejudgment. The room held its collective breath as one of the military's most respected leaders prepared to speak. General Stone's voice carried across the silent briefing hall with unmistakable authority and respect. Ladies, and before we conclude this briefing, I believe it's important for everyone in this room to understand exactly who Commander Mitchell is and what she represents to our military and our nation. Sarah remained standing at the front of the room, her posture professional but relaxed. She had no idea what was about to unfold, but the tone in General Stone's voice suggested something significant was approaching. Around the room, personnel sat in rapt attention, still processing the revelation of the past hour. The SEAL felt his throat constricting as he realized that his ordeal was far from over. The 4 generals clearly had more to say about the woman he had so thoroughly and publicly dismissed, and each word was driving home the magnitude of his error in judgment. General Stone continued, her gaze sweeping across the assembled personnel. 3 years ago, Commander Mitchell was serving as intelligence liaison for a joint special operations mission in Syria. When the primary extraction plan failed due to unexpected enemy movement, she personally led a rescue operation that saved 12 American Special Forces personnel who had been cut off behind enemy lines. The room remained absolutely silent, but the SEAL could feel the weight of multiple gazes settling on him. His teammates, who had been listening to his commentary throughout the morning, now understood the full scope of his mistake. Worse, they were beginning to distance themselves from his earlier comments, their body language subtly shifting to disassociate themselves from his position. General stood and moved to join General Stone. During that same operation, Commander Mitchell identified a terrorist weapons cache that intelligence agencies had been searching for over 18 months. Her field analysis led to the seizure of enough explosive materials to level 6 city blocks and the capture of 3 high-value targets who provided intelligence that disrupted terrorist operations across the Middle East. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but she was clearly uncomfortable with the level of praise being directed toward her. This wasn't why she served, and public recognition had never been her motivation. However, she understood that the generals were making a point that extended far beyond her personal accomplishments. General rose from his seat and walked to stand with his colleagues. Last year, Commander Mitchell's intelligence work prevented what would have been the largest terrorist attack on American soil since September 11th. Her analysis of communication intercepts identified a coordinated plot involving multiple cells across 6 states. The FBI raids that followed, based entirely on her intelligence framework, resulted in the arrest of 37 individuals and the seizure of materials for 3 separate bombing attacks. The SEAL felt as if he were shrinking in his chair. Every word from the generals was another nail in the coffin of his earlier assumptions. The woman he had dismissed as unqualified had accomplishments that exceeded those of entire units, recognition that reached the highest levels of government, and a record of service that would be impressive for someone with twice her years of experience. General Hawkins, the senior-most officer present, stood and approached Sarah directly. "Commander, your service to this nation has been exemplary by any measure. Your intelligence work has saved hundreds of lives, your field leadership has inspired countless personnel, and your strategic insight has shaped policies that protect American interests around the world." Sarah stood, recognizing that something formal was about to occur. The presence of 4 generals, their coordinated statements, and the ceremonial tone of the moment suggested that this was more than just a briefing introduction. General Hawkins continued, her voice carrying across the room with unmistakable ceremony. "It is my honor to inform you, and everyone present, that Commander Sarah Mitchell has been selected for promotion to captain, effective immediately. This promotion recognizes not only her outstanding service record, but her unique qualifications for the expanded role she will assume in coordinating Joint Special Operations intelligence." The announcement hit the room like a thunderclap. Promotion ceremonies were typically private affairs, conducted in small gatherings with close colleagues and family members. For such an announcement to be made in front of a room full of personnel, with 4 generals present, indicated that this was something extraordinary. Sarah's composure wavered slightly, her professional demeanor giving way momentarily to genuine surprise and emotion. She had known that promotion was being considered, but the timing and manner of the announcement caught her completely off guard. General Stone stepped forward with a small velvet box that contained the new rank insignia. "Captain Mitchell, it is my privilege to present you with the rank you have more than earned through your service, sacrifice, and dedication to the men and women of our armed forces." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything the SEAL had ever witnessed. 4 of the military's most senior leaders took turns attaching Captain Mitchell's new rank insignia to her uniform, each one offering words of congratulations and recognition. The level of respect and admiration displayed by these leaders was unmistakable and profound. General spoke as he completed his part of the ceremony. "Captain Mitchell, your promotion represents more than personal advancement. It recognizes the critical importance of intelligence expertise in modern military operations and acknowledges that leadership comes in many forms." The SEAL watched in growing horror as the ceremony continued. Not only had he spent 20 minutes criticizing someone who was about to be promoted in front of 4 generals, but he had done so while questioning her qualifications and suggesting she didn't belong in the military. His earlier comments now seemed not just wrong, but professionally suicidal. General stepped forward to address the room directly. I want everyone here to understand that Captain Mitchell's promotion is based solely on merit, accomplishment, and the critical need for her expertise in upcoming operations. She has earned this advancement through service that exemplifies the best traditions of our military. The emphasis on merit hit the seal like a physical blow. His earlier suggestions about diversity programs and political correctness were now revealed as not just inappropriate, but completely false. Captain Mitchell's promotion was based on achievements that spoke for themselves. General Hawkins moved to stand directly in front of the newly promoted Captain Mitchell. Captain, the military is stronger because of officers like you. Your service demonstrates that excellence has no boundaries and that the most important qualifications for leadership are competence, dedication, and integrity. What happened next would be talked about in military circles for years to come. General Hawkins raised her hand in a crisp salute directed at Captain Mitchell. Within seconds, the other 3 generals had followed suit, standing in perfect formation and delivering synchronized salutes to the woman they had just promoted. The sight of 4 generals saluting a newly promoted captain was unprecedented. Military protocol typically dictated that junior officers salute senior officers, not the reverse. But these 4 leaders were making a statement that transcended protocol. They were demonstrating their respect for achievement, expertise, and service, regardless of rank or background. Captain Mitchell returned their salute with precision and dignity, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Thank you, generals. I am honored by your confidence and humbled by this recognition. I pledge to continue serving with the same dedication that brought me to this moment. The formal ceremony concluded, but the impact on the room was far from over. Every person present understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a promotion ceremony, but a demonstration of how true leadership recognizes and rewards excellence wherever it is found. The SEAL sat frozen in his chair, unable to process what he had just witnessed. The woman he had spent 20 minutes belittling was not only exceptionally qualified, but was being honored by 4 of the military's most senior leaders. His comments about her qualifications, her background, and her right to be in the room now seemed not just wrong, but spectacularly ignorant. General Stone addressed the room one final time. Ladies, you have just witnessed something rare, the recognition of genuine excellence by those who understand its value. Captain Mitchell's promotion is not just about her individual achievements, but about what those achievements represent for our military and our nation. As the generals prepared to leave the briefing hall, each took a moment to shake hands with Captain Mitchell and offer personal congratulations. The respect and admiration they displayed was genuine and profound, leaving no doubt about their assessment of her capabilities and potential. The SEAL watched as Captain Mitchell gathered her briefing materials and prepared to leave the podium. Around him, personnel were beginning to discuss what they had just witnessed, their voices filled with respect for the newly promoted officer and amazement at the unprecedented ceremony they had observed. As Captain Mitchell walked past his row of seats, the SEAL found himself standing automatically, his body responding to military protocol even as his mind struggled to process the events of the morning. She nodded politely as she passed, her expression professional and free of any acknowledgement of his earlier comments. The SEAL remained standing long after she had left the room, staring at the door through which she had exited. His teammates had already begun to leave, their earlier association with his commentary clearly something they preferred to forget. He was left alone with the devastating realization that he had publicly questioned the qualifications of someone whose achievements far exceeded his own, and had done so in front of the very leadership who held her in the highest regard. The lesson of that morning would stay with him for the remainder of his career, a reminder that assumptions based on appearance or preconception could be not only wrong, but catastrophically so. He had learned in the most humbling way possible that true qualification and competence often come in forms that challenge expectations, and that wisdom lies in withholding judgment until facts replace assumptions. Captain Sarah Mitchell went on to lead the intelligence component of what became one of the most successful joint operations in military history. Her expertise and leadership contributed to mission success that saved countless lives and neutralized threats that could have reshaped global security. But for those present in that briefing room, her greatest contribution may have been the lesson she taught about respect, recognition, and the danger of judging capabilities by appearances.